This video is brought to you by Brilliant. Visit the link in the description to be one of the first 200 to get 20% off the annual premium subscription. Hi everyone, let me give you the standard COVID-19 greeting. I hope that everybody's as healthy and as sane as they can be given the circumstances, and the circumstances are pretty rough. I'm filming this on May 11th, so the full health and economic toll of this pandemic is not yet known, but it's getting worse, especially here in the United States. But I want to do this video about a possible silver lining, a tiny bit of goodness that could come from this terrible calamity that we're all in, if we seize the opportunity. Let me explain. Here in the US, the governors in many states have instituted a shelter-in-place order in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, but given people permission to go outside and get some exercise, so long as everyone stays at least 6 feet away from each other. Based on what we know right now, you're at a lower risk of spreading the virus outside than inside. So in general, going for a walk is a pretty safe activity. But it's not always so easy or even possible to keep your distance on a sidewalk. In most places in the United States, sidewalks are about 5 feet wide. Imagine how hard this becomes in more dense areas, especially as the weather gets nicer and everyone wants to be out. Cities around the world have begun to realize that at this particular moment, there are fewer cars on the streets and more pedestrians on sidewalks. What if they just gave some of that space for cars to pedestrians? They're called open streets. They're open to pedestrians and cyclists and closed to all cars except emergency vehicles, delivery vehicles, and local traffic. This way, people can get outside and enjoy the warm weather while still keeping the 6-foot buffer. Honestly, people are going to go outside anyway, so providing a safe space to do it is critical. Here's the thing. Opening these streets up to pedestrians is a good idea right now in the time of Corona, but it's also a great idea to do it long term. In this video, I'm going to make the argument that many of these temporary open streets should be made permanent. The idea of opening these streets permanently may be controversial, but the idea of opening them during the pandemic has proven popular. I've actually had to revise this script several times to account for all of the new additions. According to one list, over 1,500 kilometers of streets all over the world have been open or scheduled to be open at the time of filming. That number is growing by the day. Here's a list of the global top 20 cities. Paris has opened 400 kilometers, and Lima, Peru has 187 kilometers open. It's easy to see why. Beyond the benefits I just mentioned, they're really easy to set up. This is a great reason for why cities should be adding these anywhere they can and keeping them in place. For example, when New York opened streets, they had police officers at the barricades, but they eventually tapered off and instead began to rely on community groups to keep an eye on things. So we know that they're easy to install and cheap to maintain. This is a really good thing, especially in the near term. Projections are showing that city budgets will be stretched to the limit in the coming years as a result of this pandemic. And these projects are a way of providing new amenities on a shoestring budget. Many cities are implementing open streets on low-traffic residential streets or streets that run through large parks. These roads never had large volumes of through traffic anyway, so opening them to pedestrians and closing them to cars was an easy sell. But there's also a strong argument that main streets and business districts should open up their streets. As businesses begin to reopen, there are going to be restrictions on the amount of people you can have inside of a shop or restaurant. Here in California, shops can only offer curbside pickup. This means there could be a lot of people milling around outside of a shop. This creates a situation where it can be difficult to keep that 6 feet of distance, even on a wider commercial street sidewalk. Open main streets can create safe space for shopping. Of course, there is a precedent for shutting down shopping streets to traffic. Here in the US, they're called Pedestrian Malls, and they were quite popular in the post-war years. Many of them survive today, and cities have begun looking for new places to add plazas, malls, and squares. I did a video on this a while back based on my own research. Go check that out when you get a chance. Times Square in New York is the most prominent US example of a business district where they shut down car traffic and opened it up to pedestrians. It was an overwhelming success. Opening main streets may be a great way for cities to implement pedestrian malls on a trial basis. If people like it as a public space, the cities can opt to keep it. Pedestrian malls are due for a renaissance anyway, and this pandemic gives us an opportunity to do many pedestrian mall trial runs in cities across the planet all at once. It's not only shops that could benefit from open streets. Restaurants are also facing limitations on how many people they can serve within the restaurant. Some restaurants have outdoor seating, but the same spacing rules can apply. Restaurants should advocate for open streets and open parking lots to provide them with more space to add socially distanced outdoor seating. It's summer in the Northern Hemisphere, so many people will enjoy eating outside anyway. There's reason to believe that some of these outdoor restaurant concepts could survive post-COVID-19. In places where restaurants want outdoor seating but there's not enough room on sidewalks, some cities have implemented parklets. Parklets are new pedestrian areas created out of parking spaces, effectively increasing the sidewalk space. Restaurants have set up tables in these parklets for more outdoor seating. And in rarer cases, restaurant seating has taken over an entire street. A great example of this is Ankeny Alley in Portland. Once a narrow street open to car traffic, it now features pedestrian and bicycle access, but mostly restaurant seating. This was designed in the era before social distancing, but it's a good model for what some restaurant streets could evolve into post-COVID-19. Now, the biggest reason we should make open streets permanent actually has nothing to do with COVID-19. Cars are just bad for the environment, bad for safety, and bad for equity reasons. Many people noticed how clean the air has been during this pandemic. It demonstrates how we tolerate bad air quality for the sake of cars. We have designed or redesigned cities for the car over the past 100 years, and it's time to start swinging the pendulum back in the other direction. One of the most direct ways we can do this is by reclaiming streets for people, not vehicles. If there is one city leading the way in this effort, both before and during the crisis, it may be Paris. In 2016, it began closing entire districts of the city to cars on Sundays. It's also redesigned streets and squares to remove lanes for cars. Mayor Anne Hidalgo has been aggressive in creating new bicycle and pedestrian spaces. Smog was the big reason for their closures, but the mayor continued to reduce space for cars during this pandemic. Paris leads the world in kilometers of COVID-19 open street projects. The mayor is also using this pandemic to fast-track a regional planning effort that will add 650 kilometers of cycleways once the lockdown begins to ease up in Paris. They are doing exactly what every city should be doing. They're using the pandemic as a catalyst to add more pedestrian and bicycle space, and fast. Paris isn't the only city committed to keeping its open streets after the pandemic. Seattle has already committed to making 23 miles of its Stay Healthy Streets networks permanent. It's not all good news though. There will be opposition to keeping open streets open. In fact, there's already opposition to opening streets in the first place during the pandemic. In Chicago, Mayor Lightfoot has been closing pedestrian and bicycle paths, including the city's Lakefront Path and the 606 Trail. She cited the crowds of people using them, but instead of taking that information and inferring that more pedestrian space is needed, she took the opposite view and closed the paths. Now people who get to work on those paths and don't have cars may have to take transit, which could potentially be worse for their health in a pandemic. In Washington, D.C., Mayor Bowser flat out said that, "I'm not convinced by this open street argument." She believes open streets could lead to impromptu festivals and block parties, despite this not being the case in other cities so far. But this sort of opposition is increasingly rare. Over 100 cities have opened streets to pedestrians, and there's been no real evidence of impromptu block parties or festivals. Many of the clips of open streets in this video were taken by friends and Patreon patrons from locations like Minneapolis, Oakland, San Francisco, and Glasgow. And none reported seeing anything but people enjoying the outdoors at a safe distance from others. So how do we make these open streets permanent? One thing you can do is reach out to your elected officials. Mayors and city council members are perfect for this. You can email them, call them, fax them, tweet at them, whatever. Just get in touch. They need to know people want these open streets to stick around. When you contact them, be sure to advocate for open streets where there's a true community need. In many cities, there are neighborhoods that don't have enough parks or have been otherwise underserved by the local government, often poor and minority areas. These places need these open streets the most, and this program must be administered equitably. There will certainly be opposition to keeping these open streets open, especially as more people head back to work in their cars, but we can't surrender the foothold that we have now. We can have safer, cleaner, more equitable transit networks, but that starts by getting cars off of streets and returning them to people. So between finishing a dissertation, doing these YouTube videos, and taking care of 3 kids in a pandemic, I don't have a ton of time left for gaming. And when I do, it's usually something kind of nerdy and quick, like Sudoku or crosswords. If you like that kind of thing too, may I recommend the daily math challenges on the Brilliant app. They're like a super nerdy puzzle, like this one about how waves work. The great thing is that they give you the concepts you need to solve the problem beforehand and explain the answer afterward. That's super helpful because I don't always get them right. Brilliant's great because I get my puzzle fixed, but also feel like I learned a new concept, something I don't get from Sudoku. The daily challenges are only one small piece of what Brilliant offers. It's an entire online learning platform that uses engaging methods to teach math, science, technology, and more. If you have a mostly unused architecture degree in your background like I do, you can brush up on your physics of structures. You can even learn about the physics of traffic jams. Spoiler alert, they act like waves. Or you can learn something completely new. Brilliant is like giving your brain some exercise. I highly recommend it. To go get that brain workout and learn more about Brilliant, go to brilliant.org/citybeautiful and sign up for free. And also, the first 200 people that go to that link will get 20% off the annual premium subscription. Signing up is another way to help support the channel, so thanks for considering it.